Hello everyone, thank you so much for rejoining us. I'm really sorry that the connection dropped on this week's episode, but we're back. We're with Jon in a mollusk collection. Not sure what's happened, technical issues, maybe the colossal squid beak was biting through the wires and cables or something like that. But yes, we're back and we're going to dive right back into it. And we were just about to look at some of the kind of underserved, kind of ignored specimens in the mollusk collection. So do you want to tell us about what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so the reason I love these are my favourite snail, is because these kind of ignored things tend to be small. You know, we're very used to looking at the big things around us, but you know, like we're saying, you know, there's 100 species in the UK of mollusk. How many people know that? You know, how many people look at them when they go out in the wildlife? And I think these are just a lovely example. These are tiny. These are about sort of 2.5 millimetres by 2.5 millimetres. Only found on the mountaintops of mountains in Borneo. And they're a lovely example of this island evolution. So if you think of something like, I know, Darwin's finches, where, you know, they'd come from a common ancestor, but each finch on each island had evolved a different beak structure due to the different pressures on each island. This is the same, but they're not islands of land surrounded by sea. They're the tops of mountains surrounded by uninhabitable lowland vegetation. And each of them has gone under different evolutionary pressures to become different shapes. So you can see in this species, we have a few kind of projections out of the shell and this kind of trumpet-like aperture opening, the mouth of the shell. And what we think is that the pressures of different predators has shaped the forming of these shells through evolution. So these spines are probably defense against predatory slugs, whereas this kind of trumpet-like opening probably stops things like predatory ants going inside and sort of eating the snail from the inside out.
Whoa.
And on each mountaintop, it will be slightly different spines, different shape, different protection, different barriers, all dealing with different combinations of predators.
That's so cool. It's like attachments they've got to fend off whatever's in their habitat. That's super cool. And it's nice because obviously the snail shells come in all sizes and shapes, but like the kind of common kinds that you find in the UK that you might see in parks or gardens, they don't have all these like spikes and what do you say, trumpets and stuff like that.
Yeah, most of our snails are not quite as beautiful as this, but you get some things like the hairy snail, with lovely kind of hairs on it when you look under a magnifying glass. So, I mean, I'm very fond of our own native fauna. Yeah. People should definitely get out, have a look, and yeah, there's some beautiful biodiversity.
Definitely. You mentioned with these that they're fending off carnivorous slugs. Now, I've never heard of that before. There are many kind of slugs and snails that are carnivorous.
There's not loads, but there are some. Like most of slugs and snails eat vegetation or decaying vegetation. They're very important for recycling nutrients in the environment. But yes, some are predatory. Actually, do you want to go and have a look at some?
Yeah, let's go for it. As we're going, we've got obviously more questions that are coming through. More guesses for the mystery specimen as well. Someone thinks it could be a marine snail. Okay. We'll be revealing that at the end, so make sure you stick around. So let's have a look in some of these collections here.
So these are what we call streptaxid snails, and these are a huge group, kind of tropical across Asia and Africa, carnivorous snail. And these tend to, basically, they rasp away at the shells of other snails. So if you notice a garden snail, I mean, maybe eating your hostas or your lettuces, you might see them kind of rasping off the upper layer of the leaves. Yeah. So they have a radula. All snails have a radula, and they're using that usually to break down vegetation. But in these species, they actually rasp away at the shells of other snails in order to get through the shell in order to eat the meat.
That was quite strong then.
Yeah, very strong structures, very sharp. In this group, they're often slightly wonky is the best way to describe them, sort of off-centre. And that's, you can see here, even with the small ones, but in this bigger one, you can see the mouth is at an angle. That's one of the features, and often, and I'm not going to be able to find one because obviously it's, you know, I've opened the wrong drawer. They often have these kind of little sort of prongs in the mouth, and that's one of the ways we identify the different species. You know, counting the kind of what we call teeth in the mouth, looking at the shell shape. And in fact, people are often, my other colleagues that work on non-molluscs, can you believe such a thing? They often quite surprised that even now, most new species are described from shells where we can't actually find the living animal. So we may never ever have found the living animal, might not be able to DNA sample it. Yeah. So, you know, for most species, the dry shell is enough for us to distinguish it. Not in all cases. There are cases where the shells of species are too similar, but for the majority of species, and for many species described now, we just use these dry shells using very traditional sort of taxonomy and morphological things, the same as my predecessors were doing 150 years ago, looking at the shell shape, comparing them, looking at the different features and trying to work out if they're a new species.
So these collections are so useful then, because we're looking at specimens, as you said, that may never be found alive. Are molluscs particularly like at risk from like what's going on currently with like climate change, land use change, that sort of thing?
So actually, it's really sad. Terrestrial molluscs, there's been more recorded extinctions in the last 180 years than there has for any other group of animals.
Wow.
Now that doesn't say it represents real life extinction.
Yeah.
One of the, sad benefits of having a hard shell is you can find the animal even though it's not there. Right. For example, Darwin went to St. Helena in the 1830s. And
where is that, an island?
It's an island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, pretty
right.
much slap bang in the middle between South America and Africa.
Okay,
so
right.
very remote volcanic island. And he found shells of a species called Chilonopsis, which he believed, and we now think he was right, was already extinct when he landed on the island. But because these hard structures last, you have this record. They're not fossils because they haven't been fossilized. They are the tissue from the shell, but they last, depending on the environment, in the soil, in the mud, under leaf litter for a long time. So you can find these shells even if they may actually have gone extinct.
Right. That's so. Yeah, we've got like such an interesting map of where these species are found, even if they're not there anymore, because they leave behind these really quite not iconic, but identifiable shells, right?
Yeah. I mean, people often ask me, like I say, I don't work on marine shells, I'm surprised that a mollusk lives in a seashell. People don't connect sometimes that these shells are produced and an integral part of an animal.
Yeah. I mean, on that point, actually, we had a question to you from James. If molluscs can repair their shells, or do they regrow them, or do they live with the damage for the rest of their lives?
So they can repair their shells. So the way they get the calcium is from their environment. So freshwater marine shells take dissolved calcium, different forms of it from the water. Terrestrial, they get it from the soil. So incidentally, in limestone-rich areas, places like Box Hill, where there's a lot of limestone or there's a lot of calcium in the environment, you tend to get a lot more snails, a lot more diversity, and a lot more abundance. And they can repair their shells. So if they've been damaged in a fall or, sort of mauled by a bird or something, as long as the damage isn't too much, they can repair their shell. And you can often see that in the common garden snail, one of the things you might find in your back garden, park, or local green area, compost bin. You'll see these cracks that have been filled in because the shell will probably be a different colour, and you can see where they've had to repair the shell.
That's super cool. Awesome. Well, I guess that's something to look out for then. Can we see some more things in these? I love looking at these cabinets. Is there anything else?
Let's go around this way.
Yeah, sure. I'll follow you around.
So one thing I think is interesting is just the kind of varied amount of research that goes here. And a lot of the things that I'm involved in are sort of traditional taxonomy. So what is a species? What are we going to call them now? Looking at evolutionary patterns, how we've got sort of the biodiversity that we have around us, and of course the sad extinctions as well.
Yeah.
But there is some more applied research that goes on in the museum. Now, it's not something I do, but these collections are very useful for it. So this is a group of snails called Biomphalaria, and these are freshwater snails. And weirdly, most freshwater snails are actually more related to terrestrial than they are to marine snails. They have a lung, just like their terrestrial counterparts. But these are an intermediate host for a disease called schistosomiasis, which is a neglected tropical disease that is caused when parasites, these flatworms, go from the intermediate host, which is a snail, and then into humans. So it normally goes through the skin. So it's often caught by children or people that work in the water a lot. And it's thought to kill, we're not quite sure, but it could, tens of thousands of people a year could die of it. It's thought that maybe 200 million people have it. It is curable with a course of medicine, but reinfection occurs as soon as people come into contact with the water. So we have a huge amount of research here, historically and ongoing, looking at not only the parasites here, but also the host, the intermediate hosts, and seeing how people can break these linkages to make sure that maybe it doesn't spread to waterways, removing it from waterways, and helping to understand and inform treatments that could help with new forms of preventative care.
Right, wow. So that's a kind of a great example of some other research going on here at the museum that is having very much real world implications that affect people's everyday lives in some communities.
Yeah. And in fact, I was just noticing that some of these, we use green boxes. You might see these green boxes.
I've never seen those before in the collections we've explored on this show.
So we use green to show that they've been figured or talked about in a scientific paper. And these were actually figured in a book by David Brown, who used to work at the museum, on his freshwater snails of Africa. And that's a really pioneering book in understanding the biodiversity of these snails and linking them to the parasites that they hold. So yeah, when we see these, we know that they've been used in an important scientific publication.
Wow, that's really great. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for those in other collections that we explore on this show as well. That's fantastic. Let's head back over to that area.
Okay.
Because there were some really cool specimens you had lined up that I think it would be great to get a closer look at. So yeah, if you want to follow me through this way. I had my eyes on that thing over there. I spotted that. I don't know if people in the audience could have seen that.
I think it spotted you as well. It's, we do go out on expeditions and collect material, and this is something I collected myself back in 2019. We were on a joint expedition with CFAS and the British Antarctic Survey, actually looking at the waters around St Helena, what we just talked about, and Tristan da Cunha. And this, let me just pop a glove on. This is a wonderful species called the cockeye squid, or the strawberry squid. I'm just going to get it now. And one reason it's called a strawberry squid is you can see it's covered in lights, and these kind of dark bits, they're not strawberry pips, they are lights.
They're lights?
Yeah, so lots of animals in the deep ocean. This probably came from about 750 metres. And lots of animals in the deeper parts of the ocean use lights to communicate or to attract prey.
Yeah.
So this may use it to confuse predators, but also to maybe attract a mate.
Yeah.
Things like that. Or to attract prey by sort of shining these lights, trying to fool into something like it's a shoal of prawns or something.
Yeah, wow, it's absolutely covered in them.
Yeah, and if you see, they have two very different eyes. So they have a normal, if you're a squid eye, with a blue lens.
Yeah.
And if I turn it round, they have this elongated eye with a yellow lens. If I put it in profile, you can see just how extended it is.
What?
And it basically has two different eyes because it lives in between two different worlds. Above it is the kind of upper water, and below it is the deep ocean. And
it's like a telescope eye.
It's exactly what it is. So they lie on their side, and this eye acts as a telescope, moving around. And the yellow lens that you can see here is perfectly evolved for looking at the silhouettes of creatures that are sort of backlit against the sunlight that does make it down.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas this sort of smaller eye with a blue lens, that is good at seeing the flashes of bioluminescence produced by other animals. So it's seeing the two different kind of light structures, the no light basically, and the silhouettes above it.
So it's got an eye on both above and below. So it swims on its side?
It swims on its side, yeah. Looking up and down at the same time.
Wow, and yeah, I mean, I can imagine it would be confusing for us if we had an eye looking a different direction all the time, but then they're perfectly adapted for that. That's incredible. Wow, I've never seen anything quite like that.
It's kind of cool, isn't it?
That's super cool, yeah, wow.
And do you want to go for, this is another good one. Let me bring this over here. This is, shows why we use scientific names. So the common name for this is the vampire squid, but it's not actually a squid. It's actually more a type of octopus.
Oh, wow.
And this has my favourite scientific name.
Yeah.
Vampiroteuthis infernalis, which
That's
is
pretty good.
The vampire squid from hell. And these live really deep down, so again, probably over 1,000 metres, living in the oxygen minimum layer. It's the only animal that we found that constantly lives in this zone. And what I love about it is when they're threatened, they move very slowly in their adult life, feeding on marine snow, so all the dead particles from above. But when they're threatened, they squirt out a bioluminescent mucus. Imagine something's chasing it, and in the dark ocean, their eyes are going to be very sensitive. This bioluminescent mucus will sort of hopefully temporarily disrupt their vision, allowing it to slowly blob off in the other direction.
So bioluminescent, so it like flash them?
It produces this slime. It squirts out this glow-in-the-dark slime. It's not ink. They don't have an ink sac.
Right.
But it just produces this trail of glow-in-the-dark mucus.
And so they're like dazzled. They're like, where's it gone?
Exactly, and then this can blob off in the other direction.
And why is it called a vampire?
Well,
from hell.
From hell.
I guess the deep ocean.
The deep ocean.
It could be considered hell
well,
for some
I'm not
people.
sure. It was described by a German scientist called Jon in 1910.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's possibly because its arms are joined by this kind of web, maybe like a cloak. It's kind of
a bit like a bat swing kind of thing. Yeah.
They don't have fangs.
Oh, it's so black.
But the inside is covered with these little hairs. So maybe they were the kind of Dracula fangs.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, how we name things yeah, I mean, with naming things, you can almost name them whatever you like, as long as it's not offensive.
It's incredible. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that one. We had a question from JT actually asking about how ancient are molluscs? Like, how far back do they go in Earth's history?
So they're a really old group. Now, I'm going to say this is not my area.
Okay, no worries.
in the cephalopods, for example, they go back sort of 500 million years. And when you think of things like nautiluses, you can see nautilus fossils that are like 350 million years old, and they look very similar to the species that we have around today. So obviously they have evolved, different species, but they're a kind of their form hasn't changed much because they are so perfectly adapted.
Right.
And the marine molluscs before that have been around a lot longer, so they're a really ancient group. Which is why, if we remember at the beginning, we were saying you've got a snail on one side and a squid on the other, and because they've been around for these hundreds of millions of years, you've had time for that diversity of form to evolve. Yeah,
that's really cool. So hopefully that answers, but also I'm sure they can find that information on our website as well for those exact dates.
For the paleontologists among you.
We're coming towards the end of the stream. I think it would be good to take another look at the mystery specimen and reveal what that is, and then wrap up with a few more questions. So I'll remove this one, pop that over there, and I'll just zoom out a bit. There we go. So there we have it. Just a couple more guesses that came through. I might need help with pronouncing one of these words. Someone has guessed that it could be a scaphopoda.
Yes, that's a tusk shell that someone else said. That's a scientific name for it. That's a good guess.
That's a great guess. And then we've also had some sort of venom delivery system as well. So that's the guesses we've had through. Can you reveal what a mystery specimen is?
So I think there's some really good guesses there. But no one's got it right. I don't think. This is a love dart.
A love dart?
Yeah, so not all, but some land snail species produce this hard, sort of calcium-based dart, arrow, that they fire into their partner whilst they're mating. So most terrestrial snails are...
How do they fire it?
Well, so most terrestrial snails are hermaphrodites.
Yeah.
And they mate, most of them sort of face-to-face.
Yes.
So they have a genital opening on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And they meet, and they exchange sperm to fertilise each other's eggs, sometimes both at the same time, sometimes not. And in some groups of species, at the same time, from the same opening, they push out this hard dart. And it's actually thought it might be where Cupid's arrow comes from, because it only evolved in courtship. And for a long time, and still we're not entirely sure why they do it, but studies have shown that when a love dart is produced, because they don't produce them every time they mate, but when a love dart is produced, more offspring are produced by the partner that produces eggs. They're hollow. They have like a kind of hole running through the center. It's thought that maybe there's some kind of secretion, some kind of hormone, proteins or something that they push into their partner, and the arrow is a kind of like a straw linking the two of them, and it allows them to maybe inject some kind of fertility-enhancing chemical. Other people have theorized that it's kind of that competition by making a wound, which can be harmful to the...
It's that huge. Kind of... when you think of a snail, like it's less than a centimetre long, but for a snail, that's
And some
big.
people thought that, that kind of sexual selection through doing something that's disadvantageous. So, if you can survive stabbing, then you're obviously a worthy partner to bear my children.
Don't like that much.
Latest theory is the chemical theory that it's some kind of hormone or protein that goes in it that increases fertility.
So work is still being done on fully understanding how and why this works.
And not all snails do it, and not all snails that can do it all the time.
That is incredible. Do you know how far it can travel?
It's not like a firing arrow. It's next to each other, pushed from one to the other.
Okay, so they kind of like...
Yeah, I guess it's more spear than an arrow.
Yeah.
But it's got a love dart or a love arrow.
I just wanted to pick up on that though, because you mentioned spear. Like, we did have a question through a lot earlier about molluscs using toxins, and then we also had someone ask about a venom delivery system. Do they use a kind of dart spear as well?
So not terrestrial snails. There are groups like the cone shells. So cone shells, famously a toxic group of marine snails. They generally either prey upon fish or worms. And they have that radula we were talking about earlier that snails use for rasping your lettuces. That has been modified in these groups into a venom delivery service, a kind of dart-like structure, not unlike that, which they fire, and they do actually fire them.
That one actually fires.
Into their prey. And that delivers the toxin directly. Wow. And in some species, like Conus geographus, it's actually fatal to humans, the toxin as well.
Right, okay, so where would those be located? Where would people need to keep an eye out for
Australia,
those?
tropical, subtropical regions, yeah. But yeah, there's a lot.
Even the snails are dangerous.
Yeah, cone shells exist in lots of different parts of the world.
Right, okay.
Tropical regions.
And if that, so...
Not in Scarborough Beach, it's going to be fine.
Okay, all right. So in the UK, you're fine from cone snails, hopefully. And then, so those can fire. How far can those fire to?
Do you know what? I do not know. That is a good question.
It's
all
all
right. I'm
right.
going to try and find out.
Yeah, we can follow up with that on like another episode or on a post afterwards. And just to kind of end on, we've got a nice question. What's your favourite name of any mollusk?
I mean, I love Vampiroteuthis infernales.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one. There is a lovely snail. It's a bivalve. And in taxonomy, you have the genus name and the species name. And someone described a genus called Abra. So someone described a species called Cadabra. Yeah. Sadly, it's been synonymized. It's not valid anymore, but there is an abracadabra snail, so it's pretty awesome.
That's pretty good. Well, thank you so much, Jon. This has been absolutely fascinating. There's so much that we didn't get to as well, so we'd love to kind of get into more of those questions we didn't get round to on a social post as well. But I will let you get back to work. But thank you so much for showing us around.
A pleasure.
Great, thank you. And yeah, thank you so much for everyone for watching along at home. Once again, I'm really sorry about the technical glitch that we had, but thank you so much for staying with us. Now, our next episode will be out next week, same time, 12:30 p.m. British Summer Time, and we'll be exploring the fossil shark collection with curator Emma Bernard. So that's going to be really, really fun. If you have any questions for Emma about sharks of the past, about sharks in general, please pop those in the chat box, in the comments, or let us know on social media and use the hashtag Hidden Treasures and we'll get to those. And yeah, make sure that you head to our Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok to let us know what you think about the show Hidden Treasures, what you'd like to see more of in the future, or also leave your comment down below in the comments section if you're watching after the fact as well. And as always, if you enjoyed this show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell notification icon. We've got more episodes of Hidden Treasures for season 2, but also other videos and other content coming, so you don't want to miss any of that. And if you've missed any of the previous episodes from season 1 or season 2, you can find them all in a playlist on our YouTube channel as well, so make sure you catch up. But until next week's show, that's all for now. Thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.